But I don't want to steal the moderator's thunder, so I'm going to move over to the next section of the program. As we begin this evening, it's very important that we do warmly recognize our sponsor for this evening's event. Our sponsor is the Association of Aerospace Industry in Brazil, which is headquarters right here in San Jose dos Campos. The representative tonight that will be speaking to us about the sponsorship is Julio Shidara. He is the president of AIAB. He was a graduate of the Aeronautical Institute of Technology here in 1986. He was a major in electrical engineering. He was a colonel in the Air Force and spent a lot of time developing the systems and deploying the programs of airplanes. Won the AMX fighter, and he modernized a lot of their other aircraft. So please join in welcoming Julio to the stage.
Distinguished authorities, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good night. It's a big honor to be part of the SSP 23, the Association of Aerospace Industries. The Association of Aerospace Industries of Brazil, AIAB, is a non-profit national class entity that brings together and represents Brazilian companies in the aerospace sector, promoting and defending their common interests and objectives, both in Brazil and abroad. Our associates work in the design, development, production, marketing, and after-sales assistance, in addition to specialized technical services in all areas of the aeronautical, space, and defense segments. Today, services provided by space-based systems have become a largely invisible utility for technology and infrastructure, including the electrical power grid, communications infrastructure, and mobile services. All modes of transportation, precision, agriculture, weather forecasting, and emergency response, among others. By the way, these are not my own words, but a quote from an executive order of 2020 of the White House. United States have classified 16 sectors of infrastructure as critical for the nation, and 14 of them depend on GPS, the global positioning system, to operate. Probably the situation is not different in Brazil. Space has become silently and far from our eyes and hearts, absolutely critical for everything we do in our daily lives, not to mention national security and sovereignty. Brazilian society and decision makers are still building this mindset. Today's panel can contribute in this process. By its very nature, astronauts have inherent authority to talk about space. So I ask the panelists to leave us a long-lasting heritage, sharing with us this night not only their experiences in living and working in space, but also how space infrastructure has become critically important for everything we do in our daily lives. When it comes to innovation, Brazil has one of the most natural gifted professionals of the world. With funding commitment from Brazilian state, I'm sure that in few decades, we can come together and join efforts with spacefaring nations to build a brighter future for humankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, President Shidara. Okay, so next we have a special treat. We have something that was just delivered from low Earth orbit about a week ago up on the screen.
国际空间大学第23届 夏季班的同学们，大家好，我是中国航天员邢海鹏，
我是中国航天员朱阳柱，
我是中国航天员桂海潮。
我们正在中国空间站执行神舟16号飞行任务，很高兴得知国际空间大学第23届夏季班在巴西圣何塞斯坎布斯市举办。在此，我代表乘组对第23届夏季班的成功举办表示热烈的祝贺。
中国航天事业作为中国式现代化的重要组成部分，走过了30多年不平凡的发展历程。自工程1992年立项以来，几代航天人接续奋斗，解决了天地往返、空间出舱、空间交会对接等载人航天3大基本技术。
通过关键技术验证和空间站建造2个阶段12次飞行任务接续实施，全面建成了以天河核心舱、问天实验舱和梦天实验舱为基本构型的空间站。载人航天工程3步走发展战略从构想成为现实。
目前，我和我的2位队友正在浩瀚太空出差。我们神舟16号飞行乘组执行的是中国空间站应用与发展阶段的首次载人飞行任务，在为期10年以上的应用与发展阶段，将实现航天员长期连续驻留空间站，每年进行2次乘组轮换，1到2次物资补给，在确保空间站安全稳定运行的基础上，开展较大规模的空间科学实验和技术试验。
外层空间是人类共同的资源，中国载人航天始终将和平利用太空、合作共赢作为发展理念，以开放的姿态开展国际间的交流与合作。
自工程立项实施以来，先后在航天器平台技术、空间科学实验、航天医学和航天员选拔训练等方面，与多个国家航天机构以及国际空间大学等国际航天组织开展了广泛的合作与交流。
中国载人航天事业的
Everybody, it's a pleasure to have you all here. It's a pleasure to have such distinguished audience, and I'll excuse myself and have a seat as well. And thereafter, let me introduce our three panelists today. We have in our screen our astronaut Pontes, the first Brazilian astronaut. He serves as a fighter pilot, test pilot, flight safety specialist, aeronautic engineer, and leadership instructor as for the Brazilian Air Force. In 1998, he was selected by NASA as a mission specialist, and in 2006, he flew to International Space Station on board the Russian Soyuz TMI-8 as part of the ISX Expedition 13 crew. In 2018, he was appointed as our Minister of Science, Technology, Innovation, and Communication, and thereafter a Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovation. And in 2022, he was elected as for the Brazilian Senate. So welcome, astronaut Marcos Pontes.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's really my pleasure to be with you this evening.
Let me introduce the other, and then I'll give the 5 minutes speech to everyone. I would like to invite to the stage the astronaut Zion Proctor, who was a mission pilot of the Inspiration 4. She was a mission pilot for the Inspiration 4 all-civilian orbit mission to space. Besides being an artist, she's also an analog astronaut and also completed 4 analog missions. She served as a member of the Arizona Wing Aerospace Education Office and had appeared in multiple international science shows, including the Netflix documentary series titled Countdown Inspiration 4. And our third panelist is astronaut Robert Thursky. Astronaut Robert Thursky, he has a 28-year career in the Canadian Space Agency serving as an astronaut. He flew on board the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1996 for 17 days in a research flight. And in 2009, he spent 6 months on board the International Space Station, where he conducted research. He operated robots and repaired the station system and experiments using his mechanical engineering skills from the University of Calgary in Canada. So welcome our 3 panelists of today. Thank you all 3 very much for being here. And let me start with our Senator, astronaut Marcos Pontes. Would you like to give your introductory speech?
Hey, Clésio, very good to see you again.
It's a pleasure.
Can you hear me now?
My pleasure. We can hear clearly.
Okay, good. So, good evening, everybody. Good to see you, Clésio. Very good to see Bob Thursky, my class in NASA, and my compliments to astronaut Sian as well, and to all the participants. It's really my pleasure to be here with you this night to talk about some aspects from the space flight and to discuss some of the elements that compose the space flight and all this around the space research and space applications. As you know, I was the Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovations, so I had this opportunity of having the space program with me, and we did pretty good advance during the time I was in the ministry. With the INPE, we launched 4 satellites, and I had this opportunity of working with the technicians, the engineers. We have a pretty good team of professionals When we think about space applications, I would like to emphasize here, just at the beginning, to start our conversation that we can have in the next talks. But I remember the project that we did with the state of Paraná, which was like using satellites to monitor construction sites for the government. That was really interesting. That was proposed by the Paraná controller organizations. So they were responsible for monitoring and following all the details of those construction sites. And that was a pretty successful project that now I believe is going to be in other states as well of the Federation. So it's just one example of application, directly applications of our satellites, all the infrastructure and knowledge that our professionals in INPE, they have. So I will stop here because we have so many things to discuss about the space flight and other possibilities for now and for the future. And I'm here, as you see now in the Senate. I wish I could be there with you in person. However, I had a surgery 2 weeks ago, and the medical doctors, they do not allow me to travel. And Bob Tursky is a medical doctor. I believe he knows a lot about this as well. So I'm still here recovering, not allowed to do some efforts or flying, but it's very good to be with you. So back to you, Clésio. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcos. I will break a little bit the formalities. If you allow me, I'll call you Marcos, Zion, and Bob. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And it's great to hear you, and it's great to see that you're healthy, and welcome back to the stage, welcome back to us. Thank you very much for the introductory speak. Zion would like to start with your warm-up.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. How are you doing tonight? When I was younger, I wanted to be an astronaut and a pilot. And, you know, a lot of times those dreams slip away. How many of you wanted to be an astronaut when you were younger? How many of you want to go to space now? But it's interesting how those things have a way of coming back around. And so in 2009, I was almost a NASA astronaut. I got down to the yes/no phone call, and it was a heartbreaking no. But then I was able to repivot and think about how do I still advance human spaceflight even if I'm not a NASA astronaut? And that's when I became an analog astronaut living in Moon and Mars simulations. I did my first one in 2013 with high seas on the Big Island of Hawaii, and I lived in that simulation for 4 months. It was a Mars simulation investigating food strategies for long-duration spaceflight for NASA. And so I was kind of doing those things, and in fact, I went back and lived in high seas in 2020, right before the pandemic. I went back and we did the first all-female Mars analog at high seas, and we came out at the end of January, and as you know, February of 2020, we went into the worldwide pandemic. And you know, that was kind of like living in an analog to some extent, because you couldn't go outside, and if you did, you had to wear your mask and do all those things. But it was also an interesting time to unleash creativity. How many of you started baking during 2020? You're like laughing. So there's some people raising their hand. Yeah, I started baking. How many of you picked up a musical instrument during the pandemic, right? Or maybe you started cooking, or you started doing something. Well, I became a space artist and a poet in 2020, and it was 9 months later that skill won me a seat to space with Inspiration 4, the first all-civilian mission to orbit. And the way that happened was I won the Prosperity seat, and in order to win that seat, you had to create a Twitter video. You all know Elon owns Twitter, but he didn't back then. But I had to create a 2-minute Twitter video expressing why they should take me to space. And so instead of telling people that I'm an artist and a poet, I decided to show them that. And I wrote a poem called Space to Inspire. Would you like to hear it? Okay, I think I'll stand up for this because it feels more fitting. So this is the poem that won me my seat to space. You've got space, I've got space, we all have space to inspire. That's why we dream of going higher and higher. But what is space if you can't breathe? Let's stop sucking out the air of our humanity. We have a moment to seize the light, Earth from space, both day and night. We have J for justice, to ignite the bold. We have E for equity, to cut past the old. We have D for diversity, to end the fight. We have I for inclusion, to try to make it right. A Jedi space to rally behind, a universal force so big it binds. Inspiration to change the world, a new beginning for us to hold. It's not about you, it's not about me, it's about space to inspire for all of humanity. Science, technology, engineering, and math, sending us out on the explorer's path. But don't forget the arts, the heartbeat of time. Consider sending a poet who knows how to rhyme. So let us drop the mic and close the capsule door, but please make sure Dr. Proctor's on board. My space to inspire is what we need, inspiration for all of humanity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We see we came from the Senate from Brazil, going to the arts. What is the pressure on you, Bob? How can you have your 5 minutes speech in that way? These guys really push up.
No, I can't beat either of these two, so that was marvelous. But I grew up during a marvelous era, so we'll talk about history.
Wow.
I was a child. I was an adolescent in a great period of time for world society, and that was the 1960s and the 1970s. And the world was moving fast on so many fronts at that time. So science, technology, medicine, delivery of health care, civil rights were being looked at as well. And then, of course, that era is when spaceflight began. In 1961, the very first human being went into space. And his name was Yuri Gagarin. He was from the former Soviet Union. And only 8 years later, 2 people walked on the moon. So that shows you the effort, the interest in science and technology and pushing that we could go from never having been in space to 2 people walking on another heavenly body. So I got caught up in all of that, and I pursued science, technology, and healthcare as my educational path. You know, back in those days, the early days, for good reasons, all of the astronauts and all of the cosmonauts were the same kind of people. They were all men, they were all white, they were all from the military, they were all test pilots. But by the time my dream came alive, I had the opportunity to join a completely different astronaut class with Marcos Pontes, that was very much international, male and female,
Era mais internacionais, tinha homens, mulheres, diferentes etnicidades, culturas, raças, ideologias políticas. Então, era algo bem internacional, com a inclusão e diversidade, fazendo parte. Eu uso aqui a bandeira brasileira, representa o Marcos Pontes e a participação dele nesse treinamento para 17 astronautas. né? Então, o que eu estou querendo dizer é que as viagens espaciais unem as sociedades. Eu voei na Estação Espacial Internacional, que é uma instituição de pesquisa incrível, mas o melhor é que ela é internacional. Eu acho que quando a gente terminar o programa da Estação Espacial Internacional, o legado vai ser ao
We work cooperatively together to extend the capability of humanity into space, to inspire the public to take on audacious challenges, and to encourage children to consider science, technology, engineering, arts, and math as potential career paths.
Excellent. So you see, we have this interesting opening of the panel. We see people from the Senate, we see people from the arts, we see people that carry the history of the space flights. We have a diversity in space. We have a extremely interdisciplinary sector. So let me start. We have a lot to talk about tonight, but let me start warming up. What are the kind of preparation that we have to do to be an astronaut? Everybody here, if not all of these guys, raise the hand when you ask us, who want to be an astronaut? Who want to be on the space right now? I would be after lunch. I would be after dinner. Would be okay. Now we're going to hold for a while. But now let me start with Marcos, far away from me here. How is the preparation? How is the life? How is the life of an astronaut? How do you prepare? How do you prepare yourself? Mindset. And then afterwards, I'll ask you if you would like to jump to include a few more comments on that. But let me start far away. Marcos, can you please start?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Actually, this is something different from what I imagined at the beginning when I was participating in the selection process, which is not easy, of course. But then I was expecting to have the training, because they say astronaut training. I was thinking much more about the fitness training, something like this. But then when you get there and you get with your classmates, you start having the classes, you realize that the training is much more complex. It actually involves a lot of different disciplines, different aspects. For example, I believe if I would divide the training in percentages, I would say 70% of the training, 2 years training there, 70% of the training is about the technical side. So how to operate the systems in normal conditions, off nominal conditions, how to assemble parts or disassemble. So pretty much 70% is more about the technical side. We are pretty much like flight engineers, and they're flying. And about 15% of the training I found about the emotional training. So think about this. You are inside the spacecraft, a very small place with other people in a stressful and dangerous situation. So it's very important for you to have emotional training, so how to be with other people in that situation. About 10% of the training is pretty much about the physiological aspects of the training. So you have to know your body, you have to know how your body is going to be stressed in space and all your systems, how to prepare yourself and how to defend yourself or protect yourself from the harsh environment that you find there in the space or inside the spacecraft, or even with all the movements that you have when you are going up or coming down. So the physiological aspect is very important. And about 5% of the training, of course, you have the fitness part, which is the easiest part, of course, but is a very fun part of doing that. In the middle of all this, you have the survival training, you have medical emergence training, you have somewhat specialized training like extravehicular activity training, which is really fun also doing, but it's not easy. Also, you have robotics in other disciplines. So it's really like a very large spectrum of training, and it's very good. And one thing that is important about the training, you have to like being with the people. So your classmates are your best, your best support in doing all this training. You have your families, we have our families, and of course the time to be with the families are very reduced during the training. And so we are very, very close, very tight community of the astronauts. And we keep that after the training, after the flights, after retiring, let's say. And and this is really good. We still today have a Space Explorers Association that we meet time to time to talk about our experiences and how the life progresses after the being in the space, so being an astronaut. So it's a very good experience of life, and very good experience professionally speaking as well.
Excellent. So see, broad training. But Zion, what was the one that caught your attention about your training? We know that you have, as Marcos mentioned, a broad training from the mechanics for assembling, disassembling, for healthcare, first aid. Which one was the one that grabbed your attention during the training? Which was the activity that bring you alive?
Well, I'd have to say the fighter jet training was the best, because I'd always wanted to be a pilot and fly fighter jets when I was a kid. And so getting the opportunity to fly in a MiG-29 was really special, and also an Alpha Jet and an L-39. But, you know, thinking about the training, for me, my experience is a little bit different because I flew commercial space. So what that meant was from selection to actual liftoff was less than 6 months. And so, yeah, I found out that I'd won the Prosperity seat in March, end of March, basically, we announced to the world of 2021, and we flew to space September 15th, 2021. And so, so the training for us was all about, and me becoming the mission pilot. And you've got to keep in mind that I'm a trained geoscience professional. I've been a professor for over 23 years. And when Jared told me that I won the Prosperity seat, he also said, and I want you to be my mission pilot. And in my head, I was thinking, does he know I've only flown a Cessna 172? So if you know what a Cessna 172, it's a very small plane. And so I was thinking, wow, what does that mean to be the mission pilot? And because the Dragon capsule is autonomous, it really is learning about all of the systems that make up the Dragon, how they work, and my job was to help provide situational awareness to both my commander and the crew by watching and monitoring the flight computer and understanding whether or not something was happening, like a contingency or an emergency, and what we could and could not do. And so for me, when it came to training, a lot of that was relying on lifelong learning and knowing that I had to get flight ready in a very short period of time. And being able to, again, really love learning and having that confidence and the resilience to be able to understand that this is something that you could do.
This is amazing. Fast but rush but precise training. That's what these guys are doing here during ISU, you know.
But that's exactly what you're doing. You're getting trained flight ready in a short period of time. But you need to embrace the love of learning and continually wanting to be curious and be an explorer and take on new things. Like, and I got my pilot's license. So I got my pilot's license when I was 35 years old because it was a dream that I had when I was a kid. And instead of being like, oh no, I'm too old to get my pilot's license, it was the next thing that I did after I got my doctorate.
Interesting. You have a different history. You have 2 degrees. You have a mechanical engineering degree. You are a medical doctor, isn't it? So what about the training for these 2 degrees? Which one was the one that dominated your activities when you were in space?
Well, I think both of them had a lot of bearing on the work that I did in space. Marcos and you mentioned how broad the spectrum of space activities are. And so I was fortunate that I had a broad spectrum of education and training as well. So I was in my last year of my mechanical engineering training at the University of Calgary. And one of my professors took me aside and he said, you know, I see something different in you. What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your career? So I told him that I had this interest in getting involved in the space program. And he said, you know, in addition to your mechanical engineering degree, I think a medical degree would be very helpful to you because of all these medical challenges, these medical obstacles that are out there that prevent us from exploring further. So he took me by surprise when he said that. But you know, the more I thought about it, the more it made sense to me. I was totally unprepared to apply for medical school at that time. So I spent a few more years to do some more mechanical engineering training and do the necessary pre-medical work to apply. I got in. Shortly after I graduated from medical school, I was selected as a Canadian astronaut. So thank you to Dr. Walker for that wise advice that he gave me. And I would give the same advice to young people today who have an ambition of working in the space field. Get as broad training as you can, because the activities that we're doing today in spaceflight, as you mentioned, Clezio, are very diverse. But it's about to get even more diverse when we go to deep space. We're going to have to learn how to grow crops in space. We're going to have to learn how to mine rocket propellant and water and air from the planets that we visit. We're going to have to find new ways of developing propulsion that will get us these long distances. So my advice to any of you interested in a career in the space program, get as diverse, broad an education as possible.
I started Marcos coming back from there to now. I'm going back to you from now, coming from here to there. Coming from the point that just rise. I would like you to comment on that. How is your space experience? Meaning, start with your back. I have a back then, I know I'll go for a need for a medicine, but afterwards, the joke. How about the launching? How about the preparing? How about your back during a launch? How about your neck? How about the launching? How about the landing? What your flight experiences was for you?
Well, I had the pleasure of flying on two vehicles, the space shuttle and the Soyuz vehicle. Both were exciting launches and re-entries. But I would say for the launch, the shuttle was very exciting, very dynamic. So when we lift off, it's like you're getting, boom, a kick in the seat of the pants. And there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of vibration. It was my first flight, so I had placed a checklist on the wall right in front of me where I was seated. It was a checklist that I would go through if we got into an emergency situation. But with all the vibration, it was moving like that. It was impossible to read. The first 2 minutes are very loud, very noisy, very bumping, because we're relying on power from what we call the two solid rocket boosters. After 2 minutes, we've used up all their propellant, so we jettison them, and they fall down to the Earth under parachute. And then we continue the rest of the way up to orbit on the power from what we call the three main engines. It's much gentler ride, but that's when the G-forces build up. And the G-forces work through our chest like that, and they compress our ribs so that it's hard to get lungs full of air. So you actually have to work to get the air into your lungs. And then at 8.5 minutes, we suddenly decelerate from 3 Gs down to 0 Gs in a fraction of a second. We're wearing a harness that holds us in our seats, but with this deceleration, our legs and our arms go forward like that. And we float, we undo our seat harness and get up out of our seat, and we just float around the inside of the spaceship like you're Superman.
Like Superman.
And then there's high fives, and there's yelling, and there's screaming, and everyone's very happy because we've just survived one of the more dangerous things that people do. So you ask about back pain. You know, and that's why Marco said that, you know, we spend a good 5% of our time in physical fitness training, because Clezio, if you're going to be flying in space soon, we need to get you back in shape so that you can endure the G-forces and being able to do a spacewalk and some of the other exercise type of work. So we'll talk about an exercise program later this evening.
Good. But you have a different experience, isn't it? You
correct.
fly Inspiration 4. What was your experience different than this one?
Well, you know,
Besides the rush for preparing, you know.
flying on the Falcon 9 rocket with the Dragon capsule on top, you know, at first, you know, we'd heard about that, you know, be prepared for vibration, but boy, it was smooth. And being the mission pilot, I had my screen in front of me, and I was expecting it to be, you know, harder to read the screen, but no trouble whatsoever. And I was pleasantly surprised that it was kind of more like this, just going up like you on a dirt road, a little dirt road with a little bit of a bump going. But again, the G load coming in, and it's a gradual build up until you're in orbit. But for me, because a lot of people ask me, which one did I like more, you know, going up or coming back? And I got to tell you, going up is great and stuff, and you know, you're concentrating, the rocket's pushing you back, but as the mission pilot, there's not much you can do, because the launch escape system, if something goes wrong with the rocket, it'll kick you off most likely before you can, you know, manually do it. But coming back into the atmosphere, man, you hit the atmosphere like a bullet, and those G's load up really quickly on you, and the pressure breathing, and you're just like, oh, gravity is heavy, and you're just like, oh, and it lasted for a long time. And I actually, it goes back to our fighter jet training when we were in the MiG-29. I was in the back seat, my commander was flying, and he pulled this nice big 6G turn. And I remember being in the MiG thinking, okay, he's going to pull out of it, and he just held it and held it and held it and held it. And I'm so glad he did, because when we were coming back in the atmosphere, it felt like it was a really long time that we were hitting this like 4.5 Gs, and you're pressure breathing. But then you get kind of through that, and the exciting part comes with the drogues and the mains, because if they don't fire, then me and my commander, we can manually fire them. And so we're hyper-focused on waiting and watching our altitude drop and seeing if the drogues and the mains come out. And because if they don't, and you don't fire in time, you end up splashing and killing yourself. So you really have to like be on top of that. But luckily everything went off just the way it was supposed to. But I know that you came back on the Soyuz, and we compared that. And just like the Dragon capsule, it would make these giant S-turns in the atmosphere, and you could just hear the Dracos firing, and you could see the plasma in the Dragon eye windows going by, and it was just kind of cool.
And was there excitement after launch amongst your crewmates when you unstrapped?
Oh my goodness, that was the best.
Yeah.
Because you know, when you get up into space and you realize, for me, the first thing was just the hands going up and being like, oh, okay, this is cool.
It's amazing experience. And Marcos doesn't get back because, you know, he was prepared to fly in American spaceship, but suddenly Russian, and then a Russian spaceship, everything in Russian. How do you manage that, Marcos, and how do you experience your flighting?
Well, first of all, that's true. I was expecting to fly with the space shuttle program. I was all prepared. I was studying all aspects of the spacecraft and the International Space Station. And then we got the Columbia accident. So we lost our 7 friends there, and it was really sad with this. And finally, in 2005, there was a call from the director. It said, okay, you're going to Russia to fly with the Russians. So it was a different spacecraft, different systems. I had to study all again, of course, in a Russian language, which is not easy. So there's a lot of adaptation with this as well. But all this is part of our lives. One thing that I used to say is, think about this. When you're getting closer to your goal is the moment that you have the biggest challenges in life. And this is normal, and we have to face that. And remember, I'm also a fighter pilot, test pilot, and think about this. As a fighter pilot, you do not expect any kind of resistance or, don't expect nobody shooting on you if you are in your territory still. So when you take off, it's normal. When you go to the enemy territory, then you can expect the bullets there. So it's pretty much this. When you're getting closer to your goal, you get the biggest challenges. And the time for me in Russia was really, really amazing. I had a chance to make a lot of friends there. So it was really good. And of course, being a Brazilian in the cold weather of Russia, I was there for the entire winter. It was a difficult part as well. But then, finally, in March 29th, 2006, I was there at the top of that big rocket, the Soyuz rocket, 49 meters high, waiting for takeoff. And sometimes people ask me, are you afraid? Of course. Fear is a normal emotion of any human being. So if you don't feel any kind of fear, something is wrong with you. You don't know what you're doing, or you have some kind of emotional problem. So I was there, but along of the training, and of course being a military pilot, I passed so many difficult situations in flight, fire, and so many things. So for me, you know how to deal with the fear. So 6 seconds before takeoff, you have engines started. And 9 minutes after that, I was in space. So the ascent phase for the Soyuz rocket is pretty smooth, I would say. It's a liquid propulsion system. So it's not like the solid rocket boosters, they vibrate much more. And then you have the Gs, the last part, the third stage, you have more Gs. And then you have main engine cut off, and you are in space. I remember that moment I took off my gloves. They were floating here in front of me. That was a pretty good sensation. That was really, really good. And then I remember that because I dreamed about that a lot during my life. So finally, I was there in space with those gloves floating here. And I believe we have many candidates watching us at this moment. One thing that I can tell you, do not forget your dreams. One day you're going to fulfill your dreams. It doesn't matter which dreams you have. One thing that I can tell you that it's possible to get there and fulfill the dream. And for me, that was the moment. I was looking at those gloves floating here. Then I released the seatbelts a little bit, look at the small window of the spacecraft and saw that beautiful blue planet, as you see here behind, a beautiful blue planet. And that moment, people sometimes ask me, what was your first thought in space? My first thought was back there when I was a kid in Bauru, my city there. I used to tell my friends that I'd like to be a pilot, and they used to tell me, you be a pilot, this is impossible for you. This is just for rich people. You're never going to be there. And then when I got home that day, my mother, she looked at me with those blue eyes, the same color of the planet. She looked at me and said, you can be whatever you want in your life. If you study, if you work hard, if you persist, and always do more than expected from you. And she was right. And then that moment in space, first time I looked back on our beautiful blue spacecraft, Earth, the first thought that came to my mind was the blue eyes of my mother telling me exactly that. And that's what I'm saying to all the people that are watching us at this moment. So believe in our dreams. One day you're going to fulfill them, even if they are pretty difficult or almost impossible from their perspective at certain times. But for you, that will be possible if you believe and if you work hard to get there. So that was my first impression of looking there, back to the planet.
Wow.
Back to you, Lev.
Inspiration for the young people here in the room, and also for us that have sometimes dreamed to be an astronaut. So, okay, our journey up to now. We know that we have to prepare hard. We know that maybe we can rush a little bit. We have to have broad experience. We have to be prepared to learn language fast. We have to be prepared for preparation for what we have to do in space, a long training, broad preparing. And now we are in space. We are all astronauts. We have been launched. We experience what we have experienced to your words. How about life in space? We have to cook. We have to eat. We came from the industry that is starting with dehydrated beefs and supplements. Now we use part of this technology on Earth, meaning space is not only about the space itself, it's about a legacy to the humankind as well, so we improve our society. But how about space? Is that, since I start with you, Bob, and Marcus first, now I'm going to start with you, Zion. Is really tasty that food or that? And how about the future? Are we going to go to space farming? Are we going to grow plants in space?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my experience is really kind of unique because, again, I flew a commercial flight and it was 3 days. So we didn't go to the International Space Station. We did what's called a free flyer mission. So we went into orbit in the Dragon capsule and we lived and ate and slept in the Dragon capsule the entire 3 days and then deorbited. And with SpaceX. And so when they came to the meal preparation time, SpaceX laid out all of this food for me and my crew to test. And it was all healthy food. And it was things that none of us were used to eating to some extent, because it was really interesting, unique, healthy stuff that was the right nutrition to keep you healthy. And we completely rebelled against it. And we told SpaceX, and my commander's like, this is like a camping trip. We're going for 3 days. Load us up with the food that we like, because food and mood are tied together. And you don't want to not want to eat in space. So we had pizza.
Yay,
in
pizza.
space. We had M&Ms and Skittles. I had the best BLT sandwich. It was so good. And so SpaceX literally said, what is it that you want to eat? And keep in mind that the Dragon capsule, it doesn't have a heating element or a cooling element, so you can't heat food up or do anything. You can't cook. So what they did was SpaceX made us a cooler by basically giving us an insulated box, and then they froze coffee as our ice packs. So every morning you could have a frozen coffee or a tea, and then we had fresh food for a day and a half, and then we had more like already prepared meals to eat for the second day and a half.
Wow, pizza in space. I don't think that Marcos has experienced that. Yeah, I was once as a COSPAR meeting in Moscow, I think so. And before that in Germany, I experienced your food, and I have to confess, I didn't like it. So I completely understand. But what about, Marcos? I know that you live in Santa Maria, my city, where I was born. Did you miss the barbecue there in space? How was the food?
Yes, I missed a lot. You know, churrasco, feijoada, all those things. But you know, getting there in space, the first days that you are there in the International Space Station, you are kind of adapting to the environment. So our bodies are built here, developed here on the surface of the planet with 1G, and then you get there, you have 0G. Bob can explain this much better than I, but you have a time for your body to adapt to the 0G. So you don't feel very well the first days. I didn't get sick, but it's really something that you have to adapt. And so, and I believe that is not just me, but perhaps the majority of the astronauts, when they get there in space to stay for a while, you don't feel like eating much. And for some reason that Bob also can explain with the medical expertise, I didn't feel much the taste and the smell of the food. And so we had food that was brought to space before us. So we had some boxes of food there. We used to exchange some of them. Some are dehydrated, some of them are canned food. And so the commander used to make sure that we were getting the food, we're getting together for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. And so they make sure that everybody was eating something at least. But you lose a lot of weight in space, which is good sometimes to a good spot as well. But also in space, we dehydrate also for some reason that the body to adapt the pressure inside, the redistribution of the liquids. And so it's a very interesting environment for our bodies, for the systems inside our bodies. And I used to eat the normal food that was there, but also one thing that I liked very much, as Sean was saying, one thing that we used to have there was M&Ms. So we used to play a lot with the food, perhaps like kids again, so playing with the food. And also sometimes people ask me, hey, how about the zero G? If the food gets kind of floating there, there's no problem. You can float behind the food and you can eat them. So no problem at all. And, but it was fun. So eating, getting together with the crew during the lunchtime or dinner or breakfast was a very good time, because most of the time we are working with the systems, sometimes alone, sometimes with other astronauts, one or two of the astronauts there working some parts of the checklist for the systems. And so always concentrated in the space program, we were concentrating our tasks there, so serious most of the time. So when we get together, we used to talk about other things, not space. We're talking about the families, talking about the football player, something like this. So it was kind of a very social moment as well. So food was not only for feeding our bodies, but also for feeding our emotions, in the social aspect of it. So it was fun thinking about from this point of view.
Whoa. Bob, do you cook? How about cooking in space? How do you prepare? None of those guys touch. How do you prepare the food? The food is already prepared. And coming back to the space farming, do you think that we're going to grow something in space eventually, or in a short term?
Yeah. So, Clezio, I'm not sure if you're big into cooking, if you would want to go to space. Cyan spoke of the food possibilities on a 3-day mission. If your spacecraft and your mission is a longer one, then the food needs to be have a shelf life of many months, actually. And so what that means is that we do not cook food. There's no fresh vegetables in space. There's no fresh fruit. And all of our food is freeze-dried or thermal stabilized. And it's like camping food. In fact, if you like camping, in particular wilderness camping, then you would be a good astronaut. If, Clezio, you go on vacation and you stay at 5-star hotels, you would not do well in space. In space, there is no fridge or freezer for food preservation. There's no wash tub. There's no shower for cleaning your body. And there's no machines to wash and dry your clothes as well. So living for a long period of time in space is rustic. And part of the training that we do, Marcos and I did some wilderness training as well. The wilderness training is to learn some survival skills in rustic environments, but also to learn some of these emotional skills that Marcos was talking about. That kind of training is essential. Now, to answer your second question, in spite of what I just said about long shelf life food, we really sincerely do need to learn how to cook in space. Because if we go up in space for 2.5 years, you're not going to be happy eating freeze-dried food for 2.5 years. And also, we're going to have to learn how to cook crops.
I'm not happy in Earth. Imagine the space.
So, yes, some of you may have seen the movie called The Martian with Matt Damon. And he was showing that in the years to come, that crops like potatoes, tomatoes, raspberries, strawberries, onions will be grown in space to supplement the processed food that is there as well. It's impossible to bring along all the food for a 2.5-year mission in addition to the crew. The crew is going to have to grow their own food from seed.
Wow. You mentioned Matt Damon, isn't it? But that's another issue about space when involved. Matt Damon is the most lost guy in space.
Yeah.
But another issue in the space involved also Matt Damon in that movie was the safety. You remember that you have lots of space debris abroad. We are increasing the space sector, and we do have companies trying to bring the space debris down to Earth or putting it into the solar system to follow it to the sun. Let me start now with Marcos, which was Minister of Science, Technology, and Communication. We know that communication is an issue that have improved a lot in the last decades. We also improved the system, the technology, the microsystems. How about the safety, Marcos? How about the safety in the space? How about the clothing? How about the spaceship, the International Space Station, and the awareness? I'm bringing this topic because we touch one of the topics of the TPs of the ISU, which is water research. And I'm going to be back to this topic in the future. But one of the topics that these guys are interested in is space awareness. So how about space awareness for our life in space? You are moving to the moon to go to Mars. So how about not becoming Matt Damon and destroy our potato farm?
This is a very good question because when you think about space, the harsh environment of space, and that could be like in near Earth, near orbit, or it could be a long flight, like going on deep space flight, or going to Mars, or going to other places. Our bodies, they are going to be the most fragile element of the flight. And so, one of the major parts of the space projects, of the spacecraft, I would say, is the systems to keep our health in space, to keep us alive there, and not only alive, but of course with a good quality of life in space, which is not easy. If you think about vibration, acceleration, pressure changes, if you think about the G's, I say, or the high G's, 0 G, radiation in space. So it's a lot of elements that are a problem for our lives there. And of course, our bodies, they must adapt to the situation. And we are pretty good on this. Human beings, we adapt to different environments. If you see here in Earth, you can see people living in the desert or in the very cold places. So we can adapt, but we have some limits. In space is pretty much outside of all those limits there. And then you have the technology to protect our health, to protect our bodies there in space. Also, of course, you have to be prepared, physically prepared, physiologically prepared. You have to check your health a lot. And also, you have to be controlled in the time and space. You have all the examinations that we have there to make sure that we are doing okay with that environment. And then comes to the spacecraft environment. Of course, you are inside a vehicle in a very strange situation. So pretty much zero pressure outside. You have pressurization inside, and you have to be very careful with any interface that you have there. You have some systems using ammonia, for example. You have to be very careful when you deal with those systems. Also, you have to be careful with the contamination of the environment with any kind of vapor or any kind of bacteria perhaps can survive there inside. So, again, our bodies are the weakest part of all this. And then comes to the dynamics of the flight. So if you go outside, for example, you are inside a small spacecraft that you call the EVA flight suit, which is a small spacecraft to keep you alive inside there. That's the reason it's so expensive. But also, your spacecraft is something that you have to manage with very careful detail. So any wrong procedure, for example, can bring death to the entire crew. So that's the reason we have to be very well prepared, technically prepared to operate all the systems and how to do all your jobs there. And then you get the external environment. I said about radiation, that of course we had that, and that's difficult. We use dosimeter, but we cannot protect completely from the radiation. Solar winds and all kinds of different radiations that we have there. We have some place that you have water, can protect you a little bit from the radiation, but it's not complete. So it's a big problem for us to solve for long duration flights and long distance, like deep space or going to Mars, for example. Also, the time that we are in space, our bodies, they behave differently. For example, you lose bone density, and the more you stay there, more problems you have in these terms. Also, remember that as you mentioned, we have space debris. Of course, the space station is there, orbiting the Earth, and is susceptible to have a space debris hitting the International Space Station or your spacecraft. Of course, remember that is very dynamic, and that means very high speeds, very high energy, and anything can damage very badly the spacecraft. You have the docking, undocking procedures as well, and you have micrometeors, meteors. So again, space flight is dangerous. We cannot be like ingenious about this. It's really dangerous. But it's something that with the technology, we're getting better to be more prepared. We get better systems to protect the crew. And as we gain more and more experience in space, especially to prepare to go to Mars, to go back to the moon in the Artemis program, for example, certainly we're going to have better and better spacecraft and more safety for the crew in space. But remember, the guys there from Apollo, from the Gemini, from Mercury, they were the heroes that they started the programs, and they were there to experience all this situation, and we learned from their experience, and nowadays we have much better systems. So safety is really a big problem there in space that we have to solve. And again, technology, preparation, knowledge, and how to survive and how to behave and to live in space, we are going to get better and better.
Wow, broad experience. But how about maintenance in space? This is part of the awareness. We know that we have debris. We do monitor most of them, but we guys from satellite, INPE makes satellites. Are we bothering you too much in the space station? Are you prepared for repairing, or you are monitoring all the systems, all the space parts that we have there? What is the bigger size, smaller size that you can monitor? You are aware of course. Or you are prepared to repair your space station or the lunar habitacle that you will eventually build over there.
Yeah.
Would you like to start, Bob?
There's a number of systems on board the space station that allow the space station to do its job and to keep the crew alive. So when I say systems, I'm talking about the electrical power system, the thermal control system, the guidance navigation control system, the communication system, life support, robotics, the EVA systems. So to answer your question, astronauts need to be aware of how these systems work, and if necessary, to repair them if there's a problem. And you know, when Marcos was talking about the 70% of her time spent training, it's on the systems. Now, having said that, I will say that for the most part, during an actual mission, it's the ground support team at Mission Control that monitor the systems and that make any changes that are necessary. But there are periods of time when our spacecraft orbits the Earth when the ground is not in communication. And if there's a problem then, I need to be fully trained to know how to operate the life support system or to make changes in the electrical bus. So I do know those systems very thoroughly, but for the most part, it's the ground that controls the systems, allowing us to do the creative judgment kind of work which is the research. But once in a while, things fail. The space station has been up in space for 22 years. Some components have failed, seals get dry, and so we have to repair the systems. So we also need those broad skills. We talked about the broad skills. You can't just be a researcher. You have to be a researcher and a repairman and also an assembly person and have all these broad skills as well. Again, it's with the support of the ground. They will say, Bob, there's a problem, there's a short circuit in our carbon dioxide removal system.
Whoa.
It's kind of important.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that system is working. So we will dive into the system, pull out everything, and find the one wire that needs to be cut, and we have to be ready to.
And was the red or the blue?
Boom! So yeah, many times during my expedition, equipment failed. The carbon dioxide scrubber failed. The oxygen generation machine failed. One of the exercise machines failed. You're going to laugh when I say this, but the toilet failed as well. And when the toilet is not working, the backup method is not pleasant. So we really worked fast to get the toilet fixed.
Yeah, I think we have farming in the space station. Let me come back to you and to close this topic on the space awareness, including your experience as a inspiring for, you mean private sector coming to the space, we're improving the visitors to the space. Is this an issue that we have to solve, or we have already started solving that, the space awareness, the regulations that United Nations have put of the 30 years space debris putting down to the Earth, is enough, or do we need more?
No, I mean, it's definitely an urgent. Can you hear me?
No, we can't. Sorry for that. We have a little issue. Can you bring a microphone, please? I think we're running out of battery. Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's a definite issue that we need to start really having the brilliant minds in this room to start thinking about how we deal with the space debris issue and situational awareness as more and more things are being sent into low Earth orbit. I think I heard something like there's 10,000 satellites now, and 2,000 plus were just in the last 12 months sent to space. And if we keep going at that rate and not having any way of dealing with debris, it's an issue. And you know, and when we were on orbit, we got a call up from SpaceX saying that there could be a potential issue that we would have to basically navigate around. It turned out not to have to. We didn't have to do that. But we're hearing more and more of these stories of astronauts on the International Space Station having to get prepared for potential impacts. And so we don't want Gravity, the movie. How many of you saw Gravity, the movie?
No, we don't.
Right, we don't want that.
We
And
see,
so
but we don't
we,
do that.
We
We
really
don't face
need,
that
these
situation.
are, this is one of the things when it comes to becoming a problem solver. I mean, that's when I think about the Space Studies program and all of you here, what you're really learning is, you know, the problems. How are you going to solve some of these problems, and how do you take on a problem as an endeavor for your life's work and say, I'm going to fix this problem, and then going and diving into learning all of the things and the ways in which you could possibly fix that, and having a real passion for that kind of thing. I think that's really important.
Wow. Okay, we are getting close to our end, but let me open to the audience to do some questions. But before that, I'll let you with something in mind that you may think about. If you like to close saying something about that, I would like to think about health in space, space health, preparing, exercising. Zion, I would like you to think about mining. How about mining? We are looking for LU3 on Moon. People think that we are going for water on the Moon only because we need water for survival, but instead we need fuel, and water is essential for fuel in airspace. And Marcos, you have served as a Minister of Science Technology here in Brazil, so I would like to see your words about the space sector in Brazil, especially the imaging. What's the imaging? Space imaging important for the technology that we use in Brazil right now. So think about that. Hold your question, hold your views of these topics to the end, so you can grab these people up to the end of our talk. Before that, let me open to the audience if you have some questions from the auditorium. Do we? Can you bring a microphone over there? Please say your name, where you come from, and fire up.
Testing. Oh, excellent. Hi, everybody. I'm Tyler Gill. I'm in the Royal Canadian Air Force. I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I asked my daughter, she's 8 years old, if she had any questions for you tonight. She's in Halifax. And, of course, she asked if there's aliens out there. So, obvious question, but, you know, with some of the interesting footage that we've seen off of San Diego, and I'm sure you're aware of that footage, and you know, being on operations yourselves, I'm sure there's interesting things that maybe make you believe that perhaps there's something else out there. So if you could elaborate, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can
Aliens, my fellows. Do we see any aliens from the space station?
I was looking, I can tell you that. No, the only alien I saw was the one that my commander brought with us. He literally brought, you know, the alien xenophobe as a joke and unleashed it in the capsule while we were there. And but no, didn't see any.
And we have another question. Can you have a microphone over here? And then I'll start. I'll ask for Marcos or Bob jump to this one. Okay.
I'm Mia. I'm from here, not this place, but the town. And I have a really small question that popped up. What's temperature like in space? Is it too cold? Is it too hot? Do you feel nothing? What is it like? Is it fine? Just, you know.
Marcos would like to jump on that. Do you feel the cold of space? Do you feel the warmth of space? How do you feel there?
Well, thanks God we have the ECLS system, the environment control life support system that was really good on keeping the temperature inside the spacecraft controlled. And we used to adjust that in 22 degrees. So it's pretty comfortable in terms of temperature, pressure as well. So we have oxygen and nitrogen pressurizing the spacecraft. So also pretty good in terms of pressure. But of course, if you think about the environment that we're traveling there, is really harsh. If you think half of our trajectory around the planet, we are exposed to the sun. So if you think about the systems outside, they get really hot. And so we had to have a protection, thermal protection system, passive thermal protection system, sometimes active. thermal protection system as well to keep the temperature. If you, when you go to the other side, so you're hidden from the sun, it gets pretty cold. And so think about our space suit or going outside, the EVA space suit. It must be very, very effective on keeping your temperature inside. Also, in terms of, sometimes people ask me, since I'm talking here about comfortable and parts of the life there in space, so sleeping in space, we use sleeping bags, really comfortable because you don't have any parts of your body compressed by the rest of your body as we have here when you have 1G. So there you're like floating inside the sleeping bag, really comfortable. But you don't sleep much, perhaps because of all the excitation. You are so excited about being in space. So you don't sleep much. And also because during the day, I would say, you are working the systems, you don't have much time to look down to the planet. So during the time you have to sleep, it's the time you can take pictures, you can see the planet, like this picture back here I took from the International Space Station. So you don't sleep much in space. Also going to the bathroom is something that you have to learn about and how to do that in a zero-G environment. It's not complicated, but you need some adaptation for this. And water, also how to drink water. So, but you can get adapted and have a pretty good life. Bob Tursky stayed there in the International Space Station for a long time. So at the end of this journey, for sure, they have much more much more adaptation to the life there. So, but in general, it's very comfortable once you get adapted to that new environment.
Thank you very much. Another question from the audience?
Hello, my name is...
Your name? Where
my
are you
name
from?
is Aida Silva. I come from the U.S., from Texas, Houston, Texas. Like 8 minutes, like close to NASA. So my question for the three of you is, what was the biggest obstacle that you had to face during your career and in your missions, and how you overcome it?
Let me know. Bob, let's start with you.
The biggest obstacle during my career was probably when I was asked to serve as a backup crew member for a European flight to the space station. Now, I did not fly on that flight, but the European Space Agency asked if I could serve as a backup crew member to one of their crew members who did fly to the station. And I was asked to do this relatively late in just a few months before the launch date. And so I moved to Russia unexpectedly, similar to Marcos. And I had to learn Russian language, and I had to learn all of the Russian Soyuz systems and all of the International Space Station systems in a short period of time. That meant that I had to leave my family. If you know where Clear Lake Forest is in Houston, that's where I lived with my family. And so I was away from them for months at a time and working 18-hour days. So that was difficult. And how did I get through it? Well, the advice that Marco's blue-eyed mother gave to him about persistence and about studying and about working hard, got me through it as well. And I didn't want to let my European friends down, so that was important. I'd like to answer a slightly different question as well about the hardest thing that I have ever done as an astronaut. There's a lot of challenging work that I did, but you're going to laugh when I say this. The most difficult part of astronaut training is learning the Russian language. I'm an older person. It's easier to learn another language when you're young, like you, but when you're older, it's more difficult. And even though I train on robotics, on spacewalking, on repair work, learning another language late in life was difficult.
Let me jump to the next question of the gentleman over there.
Hello, My name is Márcio.
Zayo.
I'm from Rio de Janeiro, but I'm living here in São José dos Campos and studying on ITA and FATEC. I would like to ask to Dr. Zion, what space experience changed in your life, and what's next?
Oh, that's
Wow.
such a great question. I think the experience of going to space that affected me the most was being up in the cupola and experiencing Earthlight. And so I, as a geoscientist, that I knew that the Earth had a high reflectivity, but I wasn't prepared for Earthlight. And when I say Earthlight, it's very similar to moonlight, but only more spectacular. So think about when you walk outside and you see the full moon rising, and you think about the way it makes you feel when you're walking in moonlight. Think about the history that we've had, humanity has had with moon and moonlight. And now think about how in low Earth orbit, you get bathed in Earthlight. And it's spectacular. And I think that along with the overview effect of being able to see our beautiful planet from that perspective, it changed me, and it made me want to come back and being an even bigger spokesperson for our planet, and why sustainability and being able to tackle some of the wicked problems we have here is so important. But when in that context, solving for space solves for Earth. And as we advance human spaceflight and go to the moon and Mars and beyond with humanity, what that's going to do is it's really going to help us become more sustainable here. And so what I do now is I'm a big advocate for ocean exploration and also ocean research and cleaning up the oceans. Because from space, every time I went up into the cupola, I was like, water and clouds, water and clouds. And so it really puts into perspective that we live on a water world, and it's so important that we take care of our oceans.
Thank you very much. There is a young lady over there with a fire or something.
Yeah, sure. Hi, good evening. My name is Rachita. I'm coming from the United States. I work in Washington, D.C. at the FAA. So each of you have broken many barriers and crossed new frontiers, which has made space more accessible. So, and especially with the advent of commercial space, it's become more open than ever. So I wanted to ask, given your time and experience in space, how accessible do you think it is right now to people even with disabilities, and what do you think we can do to make it even more accessible going forward?
Let me target you because you have more experience here in the room. You work since very big in 2 flights. So how have you see the question is about also commercial flights, how it changed. Can you answer that?
Yes, I think we really start to innovate and to improve solutions to human problems when you bring in a diverse group of people. And I think that the space program from my childhood has done nothing but diversify. So, for example, when I was young, all of the astronauts and cosmonauts were men. They were all white. They were all from the military. And today we have the latest NASA astronaut classes are 50% women or more. And there is good racial representation. In fact, in 2 years from now, when 2 people walk on the surface of the moon, one will be a woman, one will be a visible minority man as well. So the astronaut corps are moving in that direction. When I was young, not only was I watching the Apollo moon program, but I was also watching the original Star Trek on TV as well. And I think that program really set the standard for what equity, diversity, and inclusion could be about. And we're not there yet, but I do see some very hopeful things in the coming years that we are marching in that direction. Maybe the last thing I'll say is that the European Space Agency recently had a recruitment of new astronauts. And in addition to having a regular corps, they also have a corps of para-astronauts as well. So astronaut candidates who have disabilities, physical or neurodevelopmental disabilities. We're not sure if they're going to be able to fly, but they're going to go through the training so that if an opportunity does come up, where there's a space flight where they can be supported appropriately, they will fly. So we're going to be flying, in your lifetime, we're going to be flying not tens of people every year, we're going to be flying thousands of people every year. And some of those people will be para-astronauts, and they will certainly represent a very diverse, they would represent the diversity of people that we have here on the Earth.
Wow. So 2 questions from the audience, then we're going to start closing. There's one question over there and another question open over here, and I apologize. We have to be an astronaut to come here and talk a little bit more. We'll have it by the end of the... And I hope that our senator astronaut will be by the ending of this meeting, full recovered from the surgery, will be in the closed ceremony, which is now a public invitation for him. But let me start with the... with a question from the audience before closing.
Hi, my name is Lucas, and I'm exchange student here at ETA. I'm from Germany. And dobry večer, Sion, Bob, and Marcos. I have a question especially to you, Bob, as you're also an engineer. So when there's a technical question, an unforeseen situation, what are the most unconventional solutions you had to find back up there? And you also have to resolve the problem with the materials and technologies you have up there. You cannot just go to the Home Depot and buy new stuff to fix it. So how is also the process to find a solution in the team, and how do you get to resolve a situation you never planned before and probably even not practiced?
So I was in a ground-based space mission simulation. So we were in a chamber on Earth. It was a 7-day simulation. And when the door to the simulator was closed and the mission began, we were told, that's it. If you don't have anything with you, you have to deal with it. So, of course, as soon as the hatch closed and we began the simulation, we started our medical experiments, a lot of medical experiments with sensors all over our body. We realized, oh, we forgot to bring on board the conducting gel, the gel that you put between an ECG sensor and your body.
Wow.
And we had a week full of medical experiments. So what are we going to do now? So we sat down, we had a meeting, and we thought, well, let's see all the things that we have on board. And we all looked at everything, and we thought, what can we do here to make electrode conducting gel? So someone said, well, there's toothpaste over there.
That's it.
And someone said, well, there's salt over there. So by working together as a team and being creative, being ingenious, we made up our own solution of salt and toothpaste for electrode conducting gel. And we were able to obtain 100% of the data for the medical science experiment. So that didn't happen in space, that happened on Earth. But that's the quality of people that you have. You want people in a, that wasn't an emergency, but in an emergency, you want people who will be calm, be situationally aware, who will make evidence-based decision-making. And that's the best thing about being an astronaut is absolutely flying in space. The second best thing about being an astronaut is working with high-quality people who are ingenious, who are creative, who are persistent, who are visionary, and who raise my level of performance up even higher. So that's the joy of being an astronaut.
And the last question. The last question, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fabricio. I'm a 23-year-old politician.
So let's go for Marcos Pontes.
Yes, I worked as a volunteer at his campaign, and I'm so proud of you. And I'd like to ask you guys about this. Space has been giving us answers for decades now, but we have new problems coming. And a real problem that we're facing today in Brazil, all over the world, is the hardness of being in our generation. We have problems like anxiety and depression and a whole lot of things that I keep facing with the young people that I work with, and I can't give them some answers. So how do you guys think space can give us hope not only for going to space and traveling and finding new things, but to stay here and to get through all these problems with hope.
Thank you very
That's it.
much.
That's it.
Marcus would like to join to answer that. How do you manage the anxiety and the normal problems here on Earth, and how do we learn from the space experience to manage this situation? And how can you
That's a
inspire
very-
the new generation coming?
Yes, that's a very good question. Because we can see clearly this happening at this moment. Think about this. Technology, of course, being a former Minister of Science Technology, I always advocate for having more technology, more science, more innovations. But think about this. Every time you get more comfortable life, you always get also some other questions associated with emotions, because you get used with the comfortable situation, or you need fast answers, you need to have your problem solved in a quick, like a click in your smartphone or something like this. And life is not exactly that way. Normally in life, to achieve your goals, you have a long duration job to do to get there. You have to be prepared. You have to stand, to have some setbacks. Sometimes you have to be able to surpass that situation, to survive and keep going every day. You have good days, you have bad days, but this is just part of the journey to get there. And so is more in life than just clicking the cell phone and getting answers from Google or something like this. And this is one of the parts that we have to do nowadays. And I believe the space offers us some lessons about this. Sometimes you say ad astra per aspera. It's not easy to get there, that means sacrifices. That means a lot of work, a lot of effort to get there, and to try again. Mistakes, try again. Failures, try again. And then when you get there in space, you have to face very difficult challenges, but you have to keep going. You have to keep doing your job. When we lose friends, like in Colombia accident, you have to keep going. You have to keep the work done. And so, once you're there in the International Space Station, and that's something that I always like saying about the International Space Station, and Bob also said this in a certain way at the beginning of this conversation, because you're there, of course, you have all the technology, you have the science. It's a beautiful thing, the International Space Station, from the technology point of view. But in my opinion, the international part of the International Space Station is also the best thing about being there. Because you have people from different cultures, different religions, different languages, all working together for the good of the mankind, for the humankind, and so for the Earth. And so when you're there, think about this. Imagine a round table, everybody sitting in different positions here and looking at a problem in the middle of the table. And so every one of us is looking at the problem from different perspectives, given by the culture, your knowledge, and so on. And the thing that we have to learn to do on this planet is to listen to the other people. Our opinion or our way of thinking about perhaps is not the best way to solve that problem. Perhaps the best way is the other side there. So we have to learn how to listen. And I believe that was one of the best lessons that the International Space Station can give us, especially for us, say we are in a position of driving the political side of a country and so on. We have to learn how to do this. And for the young guys, what I have to say about this is live like live the life. It's not a virtual life, it's a real life. So try to live every day, each day, completely to experience the good of life. You know, sometimes you have problems you have to solve. Talk with more experienced people. Don't let your life just go by complaining about systems, complaining about other things. If you focus your life, in good things about your life, in what you can do, what you can learn from everyday experience that we have, for sure you have all these emotional, I say, problems that tend to get inside our minds. They get them outside, they get rid of them, and you can live much better. So think about this. And when you see again the patch on Bob's shoulder, that's something very interesting, because you have 6 different flags there. You have the dreams about going to Mars, going to the moon. You see all the 32 stars there representing every one of us working together, going up and working to get the best of life for us, but especially for everybody else here on this planet. I believe this. Think about the others, and your life can be much better.
Thank you very much. Explain. So guys, we are about to close the night. I would like to remember that I give you three topics to each one of you, and I would like you to close as we begin, from far to close. So I start with Marcos Pontes. What is the importance of the space imaging, or imaging from Earth to the modern society? And then, of course, your closing remarks, what you like to let to this class of SSP 23 that are here with us today.
Thank you, Clésio. Space applications, there's one of the most interesting things that we have nowadays. And if you think about Brazil, for example, a huge country, but a lot of things that we can use space, like to get better agriculture, better communications, to protect our environment, to border control, and so many applications of space. And as you know, of course, you are an INPE. So INPE is like a very good professionals about working on imaging of the planet. We have a very successful program with China, one of those CBERS programs going on since 1988. I hope we'll continue now changing the sensors, but I hope we'll continue. As we talked the time I was in the ministry. But also, at the beginning of this panel, I talked just a little bit about using satellites to monitor construction sites for the government. This is one of the applications. Of course, INPE has been working with the people from Paraná State, and I hope this program is going on. Also, we have other problems like the dams that we have to monitor as well. We had some problems, big problems here in Brazil with Brumadinho and other problems that, of course, using space technology from imaging can also help a lot, especially if you talk about radar, synthetic aperture radars. So we have a lot of applications from imaging of our planet. But also there's one that is very is out of the normal sense, talking about engineering. I'm an engineer, so we're always talking about all the pragmatic applications of space. But there's one, I'm still with the emotional side connected with the last question, to people to realize how beautiful and how important is our planet. This is the only planet that we have. We are going to the moon, we are going to Mars or other places, but we have to realize that this is the only planet that we have. This is our beautiful spacecraft. And we have to take care of this spacecraft very well. And so by having images from our planet to be shown to the people all over, for them to realize how beautiful is this place that we live on, how connected we are. So we don't see any borders, or we don't see differences. We don't see why we should have conflicts to be fighting for a small piece of this beautiful planet that we have. We would live much better. So by having images from space, I'm sure we can realize how small we are and how important it is to live in harmony all over this planet. So I'm sure if you ask any astronaut, any person that went to space, one of the most impressive things that we see from there is the sensation that we have this, necessity of protecting our only planet that we have. So this is another application of imaging from space. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for this opportunity of talking here about space flight, about space technology. Perhaps I hope, as one of the questions, I hope that our conversation will inspire many of you to be part of the space program in any country, to remember what my mother used to tell me that time back there. So we study, work hard, persist, always do more than expected from you. You can be whatever you want. You can do whatever you want in your life. So again, thank you, Clésio. Very good to see you again. Thank you, Bob. Very good to see you again. I'm here thinking, wow, I should be there, to hug you guys. And so feel this hug for every one of you here watching this presentation. And also, Xian, was really nice to know you, to meet you here. And I hope we have an opportunity in the future to meet in person. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, see, several comments coming from the astronaut Marcus Points, talking about imaging that can be used for mobility, can be used for monitoring cities, can be used for building, meaning we are closing to the smart cities. This is something that we should approach. This is something that is also one of the topics from this year of SSP. Another one that I'd like to touch, I sorry for pushing it to you, but I could not forget that you think about art. So mining is dealing with art as well. You remember the first paintings was mainly with rocks being smashed to building the currents for the colors, the big blue or the big red in Venice. How is mining important from the economical point of view and also connecting to art? Are we going to make colors from the lunar rockets?
I hope so. I volunteer to go and do that. But when we're talking about our beautiful planet Earth, and we're talking about the fact that we live on a planet with finite resources, and mining is one of the biggest issues that we have, is that we are consuming and creating more products than we can produce here. And in order for us to alleviate the pressure that we've put on our planet, we have to think about how we take advantage of space resources, particularly being able to mine the moon, Mars, and beyond, the asteroid belt in particular. And so I think that what's going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years on the moon is really exciting, because we have to be successful with how we deal with lunar resources to set us up for being able to go to Mars and beyond. And I think that's an exciting area to think about, is when we're talking about how are we going to be able to use those lunar resources to be able to further human space exploration, and whether it's using regolith to create 3D printing materials, being able to use regolith for, again, you were talking about fuel, to be able to go to Mars and beyond, but also water. All of these things are interesting problems that we've got to solve right now. And as I look out, I think about how there are people here that are going to be part of that solution. And so the one thing that I want to leave you with is that when I was talking about that poem that won me my seat to space, it's called Space to Inspire. And when the whole purpose of that poem of Space to Inspire, it's not about outer space. The most precious, beautiful space there is this space, the space that you inhabit. This is space to inspire. And how you use your space to inspire yourself and those around you matters. And so I want you to think about your space to inspire, and as you're using it and developing it to do good things in the world, remember to make it a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive space for yourself, your family, your communities, your work, for the entire planet.
Wow, what a strong message. Thank you. Bob, how about health? I know that your heart beat a bit harder when you were launching, preparing for launch. But how about the heart and the vessels in the space? How about health in the space, exercising, and your closing remarks, please?
My space passion at this phase of my life now is Mars. When I was younger, when I was your age, I was hoping that humanity would be on Mars sometime during my career. That didn't happen, but I see things moving forward very quickly, and I think that within my lifetime there's a chance that I will see people walking on Mars. But the reason why we're not going to Mars today is because of technical, operational, and medical challenges. So, technical challenge. One thing, to go to Mars, we have to land cargo and human beings on the surface of Mars. We haven't done that before. Mm-hmm. The largest payload that has landed on Mars to date are the Curiosity and Perseverance rovers. They weigh 1 ton. To support a Mars human mission, we need to land 40 tons on Mars. That's a technical problem. An operational problem that still needs to be solved is that the far distance is 400 million kilometers to Mars from Earth. And communication by speed of light takes between 7 and 20 minutes. So that's an operational problem that we need to address. And then the medical challenges may be the most serious ones of all. Yes, you're right. The heart deconditions with time spent in space. We're exposed to ionizing radiation. The muscles and the bones and the vestibular apparatus in our balance organism in our head, they all maladapt in the space environment as well. So these are medical challenges that we need to solve. But perhaps most important is we have to come up with a way of delivering health care to the 4 or 6 astronauts who live on Mars, because the distances are huge and they have to really manage their health care themselves. They can't call mission control back on Earth for help when someone develops an arrhythmia of the heart, or they trip and they break a leg. I think Brazil is like Canada. You are a large geographic country.
But warmer.
But you also have a lot of your population that live in smaller, remote villages. And the people that live in those remote villages in Canada, and I believe in Brazil, deserve equal access to health care as in Sao Paulo or in Rio. In my country's case, unfortunately, they do not get the same quality health care as people who live in Vancouver or Toronto. So I think that some of the technology, some of the approaches, some of the protocols, some of the artificial intelligence that we need to develop to support a Mars flight can actually be mobilized to improve some of these social terrestrial healthcare needs on Earth. So that's my perspective on healthcare and why it's so important. Closing words, I just want to thank the participants in the SSP program. I've visited with you, your previous classes a half dozen times before, and each time I do, they have inspired me the same way that you have inspired me this week. You are some of the most intelligent people in the space business. You have the motivation. I see you work hard. I see you play hard. I see you're very personable. You take on challenges that no one has really asked you to take on, but you're just so excited about this space endeavor that you go beyond what's required. So you inspire me. I will leave, unfortunately, tomorrow, and I will miss you. But the memory of my time with you will sustain me for the next year. Please stay in touch with each other and make sure every week you say thank you to your TAs and to your logistics people and your faculty members.
Thank you, everybody. We discovered how was the life in space. We discovered what was the preparation to go to space to be an astronaut. We discussed about food. We discussed about cooking. We discussed about safety. We just don't clean the plates. That's for another panel. And we close with health. We close with the importance of applications. We discuss about art. We discuss about mining. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to close with a huge of applause for Senator and astronaut Marcus Pontes, astronaut Zian Proctor, astronaut Robert Chinsky. A huge applause. And SSP Team 23.
A big applause for our moderator, Clesio Donardo. Good job moderating, sir. So, I know it's late. We have a reception waiting outside for us. But like Bob said, you know, you can be away from your family for months and work 18-hour days. That's an SSP right there. So we're getting practice. So thank you, everybody. Good night. We enjoyed your attendance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you.